A teenage swimmer dove into a crystal blue pool, chasing a record that would make his name unforgettable. But within minutes, silence fell where cheers had begun. What began as a test of endurance turned into one of the most chilling swimming pool tragedies ever recorded. How could something so ordinary as holding your breath turn deadly in front of everyone? July 15, 2012. In Houston, Texas. The air pressed heavy and hot. The kind of heat that seemed to stick to the skin and weigh down every breath. The clock on the wall of the MacArthur Aquatic Center read 2:06 p.m. The Olympic-sized pool stretched out like a shining mirror of blue glass, 50 meters long, 25 meters wide, with water that sank down to 13 feet in its deepest lane. The sharp smell of chlorine filled the air, mixing with the faint sweetness of sunscreen and the rubber tang of wet flip-flops slapping against tile. Cicadas outside sang their endless song, and inside the pool area, the hum of the filter was constant, steady, like a heartbeat echoing off concrete walls. 17-year-old Marcus Delgado stood at the edge of the pool, his hand gripping a stopwatch he had bought for exactly $14.99 from a sports shop on North Freeway. The band was frayed, but the numbers were sharp and precise down to the hundredth of a second. He set it on the deck and looked at the water as if staring down a rival. Marcus had lived in Houston his whole life, the son of a construction worker and a seamstress who often worked late into the night. Money was always tight, but Marcus had something rare, something no one could take from him. Lungs that felt bigger than his body, lungs that had earned him the nickname Iron Lungs from his friends on the swim team. He wanted more than just to swim. He wanted to prove that he could break limits, that he could hold his breath underwater for longer than anyone else in the pool. 4 minutes, that was his goal. 4 minutes would put his name in whispers, a small local legend in the world he dreamed of leaving behind. His coach had told him many times, shallow water blackout kills even champions. Don't play games with air. His best friend Jason leaned on the railing and laughed nervously. Bro, don't end up in the news. Marcus smirked, brushing off the warning, though the words stuck like thorns in the back of his mind. The pool glimmered beneath the overhead lights, and the shifting sunbeams from the windows broke into shards across the surface, flickering like broken glass. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful, and it carried a quiet whisper of danger if one cared to listen. Marcus stretched his arms, felt the ache in his shoulders from the morning's practice, and bent low to touch the water. It was cool against his fingertips, a gentle bite in the heavy heat of the room. He closed his eyes, took in one deep, slow breath, then another. The air smelled sharp and stung the inside of his nose. He filled his lungs until his chest burned with the pressure, until it felt like no more air could fit inside him. With one last look at Jason, who now shook his head, Marcus dove in. The stopwatch clicked. It was 2:13 p.m. The water swallowed him in an instant, cool and smooth, wrapping around his body like silk. He pushed forward, his first lap complete in 22 seconds. Strong and sure, he turned, kicked off the wall, bubbles bursting like silver coins in the blue. At 1 minute and 45 seconds, his jaw clenched tight as his body began to scream for air. This was the point where most swimmers rose to the surface. But Marcus had decided long before this moment, he would not give up. He would not break until 4 minutes had passed. The pool area was strangely quiet now. The sounds of children splashing at the shallow end faded. Even the laughter seemed to hush, as if the room itself held its breath with him. The steady hum of the filter was louder now, almost echoing in the silence. The water sparkled above him, the light bending and dancing across his arms as he pulled forward. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, he felt strong, almost untouchable. His body moved like a blade through water, sharp, precise, every kick powerful. From above, Jason clapped softly, a grin spreading in spite of his worry. For a moment, Marcus felt like he had already won. But at 3 minutes and 5 seconds, dizziness began to creep into his vision, dark flecks forming at the edges like ink spreading on paper. His chest tightened, his body begged for oxygen, every nerve screaming. He shook his head, bubbles slipping from his lips. He pushed harder, deeper, determined not to let the ache win. Jason leaned forward, frowning now, his hand gripping the railing. A lifeguard, standing on the far side of the pool, tilted her head, eyes narrowing as she tracked Marcus's movements. 3 minutes and 35 seconds. Marcus's kick faltered, a small tremor breaking the rhythm. Jason's voice called out, sharp and nervous. "Marcus," but Marcus kept going, arms still moving, eyes unfocused now. The stopwatch ticked on, each second stretching long and cruel. At 3 minutes and 40 seconds, the lifeguard blew her whistle, the shrill sound slicing through the quiet air. The pool's surface stayed still. Marcus did not rise. Time fractured. A child asked what was wrong. Jason shouted his name louder, his voice breaking. The lifeguard leapt into motion, diving from her stand, cutting through the water with powerful strokes. Rescue attempts had begun, but the seconds still raced forward. The stopwatch clicked past 3 minutes and 50, then 3:55. Marcus's body, once powerful and sure, twitched then went limp, drifting upward toward the glittering surface. The air above was so close, just inches away, yet already out of reach. The stopwatch read 2:13 p.m. when Marcus dove, and the first seconds felt easy, almost too easy. The water slid around him like a second skin, cool against the heat still clinging to his body from the air above. His arms cut through the blue, each stroke sharp and clean, the rhythm steady. One lap finished in 22 seconds, smooth and fast. He turned at the wall, pushed off hard, and bubbles spun behind him like tiny silver beads. At 1 minute and 45 seconds, the ache began in his chest, a heavy throb that urged him upward. But Marcus clenched his jaw and forced the thought away. He had promised himself he would not stop. This was the point of no return. His body wanted air, but his mind wanted victory more. Above the surface, Jason leaned closer to the edge, his voice low. He's still going. A mother near the shallow end glanced over with mild interest, but soon turned back to her child. The pool room grew strangely quiet, as if every sound had been swallowed with him. The hum of the filter seemed louder now, pulsing through the still air. Light from the high windows shimmered on the water, breaking into shifting patterns that danced across his arms and back. At 2 minutes and 30 seconds, his strokes were still strong. He felt powerful, almost untouchable. The water embraced him, cool and endless. And for a moment he believed his lungs could stretch forever. Jason clapped softly, smiling even as a crease of worry grew on his forehead. Marcus saw him through the ripples above, his face blurred but bright. That small cheer gave him another surge of energy. He kept kicking, kept pushing, time slipping away faster than he noticed. But at 3 minutes and 5 seconds, the first wave of trouble hit. Black dots speckled at the edges of his sight. The pool, once clear, began to dim. The burn in his chest grew sharper, pressing like a weight inside him. His body begged him to stop, to rise, to breathe. He shook his head hard, bubbles spilling out. His mind screamed back, "Not yet." The lifeguard on the far side of the pool noticed. She tilted her head, frowning, watching the uneven beat of his kick. She had seen strong swimmers before, but something about the way his legs shuddered set her nerves on edge. Jason leaned forward, gripping the railing, his voice louder now. "Marcus, you good?" But Marcus kept moving, arms cutting forward, even as his strokes lost their smooth rhythm. 3 minutes and 35 seconds. His legs twitched again. His body rolled slightly sideways, a small break in control that only Jason saw clearly. "Marcus," Jason called again, sharp this time. A boy splashing in the shallow end paused, watching with wide eyes. The hum of the filter buzzed heavy, the water's sparkle above him now cool, shining just out of reach. At 3 minutes and 40 seconds, the lifeguard raised her whistle to her lips and blew. The sound cracked the silence, shrill and piercing. Heads turned, mothers pulled children back. The laughter stopped. The pool felt frozen, every eye watching, waiting for Marcus to rise. But the surface stayed smooth, the ripples faint. His body kept moving weakly below, drifting forward, drifting down. Jason shouted his name again, voice breaking. He kicked off his shoes, ready to dive, but the lifeguard was already in motion. She dropped from her stand, hit the water with a sharp splash, and cut through the pool with fast, strong strokes. The stopwatch ticked on mercilessly, the numbers climbing, 3 minutes 50, 3:55. His limbs twitched, then slackened, his arms no longer pulling, his body surrendering to the water. He began to float upward slowly, not by strength but by stillness, his face turning pale beneath the blue. The lifeguard reached him as Jason shouted again, voice echoing off the tile walls. Children were rushed out of the pool, their voices high and scared. A mother pressed her hand over her child's eyes. Panic. Every second stretched long and cruel, the sound of splashing rescue strokes replacing the silence. Marcus was inches from the surface, but it was already too late. The rescue had begun, but the danger had already claimed him. The stopwatch on the deck clicked past 4 minutes. The record he wanted, recording not triumph, but the thin line between human will and nature's rule. The lifeguard's arms closed around Marcus's body, and she pulled him fast toward the surface. His skin was pale, his lips faintly blue, his chest still and heavy. Water streamed from his hair as his head broke the line between silence and air. The whistle still echoed in the rafters, sharp and cruel as she dragged him to the edge. Jason leaned over, hands trembling, shouting his name over and over. Marcus, come on, wake up. But Marcus did not move. His arms hung limp, his body slack as if the water had stolen all the strength from him. The stopwatch lay on the deck beside Jason, still running, its red numbers flashing 402, 403, 404, as if mocking the very thing Marcus had fought for. The irony cut sharp. The record he had chased was now stamped in cold, uncaring numbers on a plastic screen. The goal had been reached, but it had taken him instead of lifting him higher. The small machine ticked on, steady, while human hearts broke around it. The lifeguard pulled Marcus onto the deck, the wet slap of his body against the tile sounding too final, too heavy. Water pooled beneath him, spreading in a thin sheet. She began chest compressions at once, her hands locked together, pressing hard and fast. Each push forced his chest to rise and fall, the sound of water bubbling faintly from his mouth. Jason knelt beside her, tears streaming down his face, whispering broken words. "Don't you quit on me, man, please." His voice shook, his hands clenched tight against his knees. The pool area was no longer quiet. Shouts filled the air, children crying, mothers pulling them close, lifeguards barking orders. "Call 911. One yelled. The scent of chlorine, once sharp and normal, now seemed sour, sickly, mixed with the smell of panic and wet skin. The bright blue of the pool no longer looked inviting. It looked cold, endless, like a mirror of the sky above that had turned its face away. The lifeguard bent low, gave him 2 breaths, then went back to compressions. 30 pushes, 2 breaths, 30 pushes, 2 breaths. Jason counted with her, voice cracking. 1, 2, 3. But Marcus stayed still. Each push felt like time running out. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing closer, the hum of the filter now drowned by the pounding rhythm of the rescue effort. At one point his chest jerked faintly, a twitch that sent a brief spark of hope through Jason's eyes. But it faded fast, leaving nothing but silence again. The cruel twist was clear. He had trained for years, building his lungs, chasing endurance, and in the end, his very strength had betrayed him. He had pushed beyond the point of safety, beyond the line where the body could still fight. His own willpower had become the hand that pulled him under. Around them, faces showed every kind of pain. A little girl cried into her mother's shirt. A boy stared wide-eyed, whispering, "Is he gonna die?" The mother pulled him back, her face pale. Another swimmer sat on the bench, hands over his face, unable to look. Every sound, every motion carried the weight of something final. The rescue went on, but the truth was already written in his still form. His dream of leaving Houston, of proving himself greater than his limits, now lay in cruel contrast to the sight of his body lifeless on wet tile. The boy who wanted to rise was now grounded forever, not by poverty, not by failure, but by the silent, merciless grip of water. The pool itself seemed to turn into a symbol of that grip. Its surface shone bright under the lights, perfect and calm, hiding the fight that had taken place just beneath. It was like a mirror reflecting emptiness, showing not what was but what had been lost. The same water that had once held him up had also betrayed him, as if reminding everyone who watched that nature cannot be beaten, only respected. Jason's cries grew softer, hoarse now, almost a whisper. "Please, man, please." His hands shook as he reached for Marcus's arm, gripping it as if holding him could anchor him back to life. The lifeguard kept working, sweat running down her forehead, her arms pumping with steady rhythm, but her eyes carried the shadow of hopelessness. The present tense of the scene pressed down like a weight. Every second mattered, every sound etched deep into memory. The slap of wet skin, the wheeze of forced breaths, the sharp squeak of shoes on tile, as rescuers rushed in. It was happening now, not in a story, not in a memory, but in the cruel immediacy of reality. And through it all, the stopwatch still blinked its red numbers, cold and precise, bearing witness to the record Marcus had chased, a record no one wanted, a record paid for with silence instead of applause. By 2:24 p.m., the paramedics stood over Marcus's body, their faces set in grim lines as they pulled the mask away from his mouth. The final word came sharp, official, without room for argument. Time of death. The words seemed to freeze the air inside the MacArthur Aquatic Center. Jason collapsed to the tile, his palms smacking hard against the wet floor, the sound echoing through the cavernous room. Around him, parents held their children close, some whispering prayers, others hurrying them outside, shielding their eyes from the sight of a dream turned into a body. The sharp smell of chlorine still hung in the air, now twisted with something heavier, the sour metallic scent of fear, sweat and grief that no filter could clean. The lifeguards closed the pool. The water, calm and shining as if nothing had happened, seemed to mock every tear that now hit the tile. Police tape went up, stretching across the entrance like a warning banner. The sound of sirens faded into the distance, leaving behind silence broken only by muffled sobs. The bright scoreboard above the pool, with its glowing red digits, continued to run its steady cycle of numbers. A cruel reminder. Numbers kept moving, life kept moving, but Marcus would never again. News of his death spread fast, first by whispers among the swim team, then by text racing through Houston like wildfire. By evening, local stations carried the headline: "Teen swimmer D's attempting record breath hold." The story ran with sharp detail. 17 years old, varsity athlete, a promising future. The cameras showed the empty pool, the taped-off entrance, the white flowers someone had already left near the gate. People who had never met him now spoke his name, their voices caught between shock and judgment. Some called it foolish, others called it brave. But Marcus was not alone in his fate. The experts reminded the public of others before him. Navy divers trained for missions who blacked out in controlled tanks. Olympians who had collapsed during breath-holding drills. Young athletes in backyard pools, their lungs stronger than their knowledge, their ambition greater than their safety. The pattern was the same: shallow water blackout. A silent killer. No splash, no cry for help, just the sudden shutting down of a body that had gone too far. The connection was clear. Marcus's death was not a freak accident. It was part of a chilling chain. In the weeks that followed, the Aquatic Center banned all breath-holding contests. Signs went up in red letters at the pool entrance: no breath-holding beyond one lap. Coaches added safety talks to every practice. Parents demanded more training for lifeguards, more drills for emergencies. For a while, the story of Marcus Delgado hung in every locker room and echoed in every whispered warning. Don't push it. Remember Marcus. His name became more than a name. It became a lesson carved into the memory of those who swam after him. At the edge of the pool, near lane 3 where Marcus had taken his last dive, a small bronze plaque was placed 1 month later. It read, "In memory of Marcus Delgado, whose dream reminds us of both the power and the price of breath." Flowers were laid there each year, their petals wilting fast in the Texas heat, their colors fading under the sun. Jason came often, his steps heavy as he traced the edge of the pool where he had once cheered. He stood before the plaque, remembering Marcus's grin, his stubborn determination, his refusal to rise even when every sign told him to. The sound of the whistle, the stillness of his body, replayed in his mind like a film he could never pause. The story did not fade. Teachers brought it up in health classes. Coaches told it before swim meets. Parents whispered it before letting their children dive into hotel pools on vacation. It became more than just a Houston tragedy. It became a warning told across the country. His name traveled, carried in articles, in safety manuals, in quiet conversations by water. But under the weight of all this, a deeper question lingered. Why do people push past the line, knowing the danger? Why do they chase silence, knowing breath is the very thing that keeps them alive? The answer is as old as human ambition. People climb mountains, knowing storms may strike. They dive into oceans, knowing currents may pull. They stretch their lungs, their hearts, their bodies against nature's limits, because to stop feels like surrender, and to win feels like immortality. Marcus was no different. His lungs were his wings, and he believed they could carry him further than anyone else. But water does not bend. It waits, it takes, and it reminds us that the body is not built for silence. Now, years later, the memory of that July day still circles back. The sunlight flickering on the pool's surface, the stopwatch ticking, the whistle blowing, the lifeguard's dive. All of it returns like a circle closing on itself. The same broken glass light that danced across the water at the start now dances in memory, a warning and a symbol. The dream of 4 minutes was reached, but the cost was everything. And Marcus's story is not the end. There are others, stories of suction drains trapping swimmers, of hidden electrical currents sparking through hotel pools, of children who never returned from what seemed like a harmless swim. The surface always hides more than it reveals. If you think you know what danger looks like, think again. Pools are not just places of play or training. They can be silent traps, waiting. And if you want to hear more of the stories that prove it, stay with us, because what comes next will show you that Marcus was only the beginning.